Hello everyone, this is Srinivas, Product Manager, ITAM. In today's demonstration, we'll talk about the optimizations that are part of the product for Windows Server. So let's go ahead. Before going, let's review the basics of Windows Server licensing. Now the basics, as we know, are divided into two parts. One is for uh, physical layer and one is for the virtual layer. On the physical part, there are some rules which state that the minimum number of cores that could be assigned to a processor is 8. Minimum number of cores that can be assigned to a server is 16. And then if you see the virtualization rules, there's some virtualization rules which are uh, licensing rules which are different for Windows Server Standard versus data center. So for example, data center has got unlimited virtualization and standard does not. However, standard allows for stacking of licenses, which basically means that if you license the entire server, you can have the facility to run two virtual machines. If you license the server again fully, then you get two additional virtual machines and so on. So all these rules are just the base level licensing rules that we wanted to tell you before we go into the complex virtualization optimization mechanisms that we're going to talk about. So moving ahead on the optimization, uh, what we do realize is that although Windows Server Data Center uh, has got certain benefits like unlimited virtualization, the cost of the data center license is very high, approximately 5 to 6 times costlier than this standard license, as you can see here. Hence, it's of paramount importance that if an organization has both data center licenses as well as the standard licenses, which one should they allocate? And that allocation of licenses optimally is what ServiceNow SAM does automatically. So based on what is cost effective, the license assignment is done uh, for the data center license or the standard license. As you know, that data center provides unlimited virtualization. That is, if you have the server fully licensed with Windows Server Data Center, you can run unlimited number of virtualizations. Hence, it makes sense to use these licenses only when the number of virtual machines are really high on that cluster. Hence, that determination is done automatically by ServiceNow. And if the virtualization density is really high, then we automatically apply the data center license. And if the virtualization density is low, then we apply the standard license. So you can see that cost-effective determination is done automatically by ServiceNow. However, we do realize that organizations will not always uh, have enough data center licenses or enough standard licenses, right? They would purchase less number of data center licenses than standard. And it's very much possible that we data center licenses gets consumed as they are assigned. Hence, for those cases where cost-effective license assignment is not possible due to unavailability of rights, we auto-generate recommendations to the customer. So these features are newly introduced in Quebec, and we've enhanced them in the coming releases in Rome and San Diego. So we would really like you guys to test it out and see for yourself how this works. With that being said, let me go to a quick use case and then demonstrate this functionality on product. So this use case is about two clusters. As we can see, cluster 3 and cluster 2, having about 32 VMs running on them, each having Windows Server Standard, 2019 standard running on them. And the organization has both data center licenses, which are about 32 rights, and standard licenses, which are about 600 plus rights, right? They have got more number of standard licenses than the data center license. But if you see the virtual machines running Windows Server, it's pretty high. It's like 32 VMs are running on these clusters, and hence the virtualization density is really high. So how does ServiceNow optimally assign the licenses? So as you can see that cluster 2 has got um, standard license, standard Windows Server standard running, and there are about 32 VMs running on it. Data center licenses will be consumed, right? And as data center licenses are 32, and we license the host 16 and 16, um, this will allow for unlimited virtualization to be applied. So that means that any number of VMs can now run on it. So this cluster gets licensed fully. Now, as this license cluster got licensed with data center, ServiceNow then automatically assigns the remaining standard licenses to cluster 2, cluster 3, even though the virtualization density is high. But we do realize that this could be an optimization recommendation to the customer, because the customer could have just taken 32 data center licenses and assigned them to cluster 3, and even though the cost of a unit of data center license is more than a standard unit cost, but still, if you do the maths, 32 licenses of data center are cheaper than applying about 512 rights for cluster 3. So what we do is that we generate these recommendations to the customer that, hey, you could have applied data center licenses to cluster 3, and that would have been an optimal license assignment. So this is what ServiceNow does, and we'd like to show that on the product. So let's go to the product. So on the product, you can see that I've opened up 2019 standard, and there is 2019 data center. And you can see here that the rights owned, or the rights that the customer owned, are 32. And the license required are also 32. That means that all those 32 rights got consumed by cluster 2. And if I go to cluster 2, I can easily see that there were these 2 hosts in the machines, hosts in the cluster, and they consume all the rights, that is 32 rights. And this means that data center licenses were completely applied to cluster 2. Now, if I go to cluster 3, it must have consumed rights as well. And I can see that about 512 rights got consumed for cluster 3. And you can see here that it consumed 512 rights of standard, right? And you can see the number of installs are really high here, about 32. So about 32 VMs are running on it, and to license 32 VMs for a cluster which is having 2 hosts on it, you need about 512 standard rights. So at this point of time, we know that standard rights have been applied here. But that's not the entire story. What ServiceNow does is that it provides this recommendation to you, which you can see in the optimization and savings chart. And if I go to publisher optimizations, I can see that potential savings by optimizing licenses is showing up. And if I see this, it means that $250K of potential savings the customer could get just by applying data center licenses here. So for cluster 3, The virtual machines are 32. The virtualization density is really high, and hence, although standard was applied, the rights used were standard, but the recommended license is data center. And uh, the actual spend here with data center will be about this much, and hence the potential savings will be close to 250K of license cost savings. So that's what we wanted to demonstrate. Thank you so much.